Episode 28. You are listening to the new Glam Gal Podcast, the podcast where style meets confidence. Conquer the frustration of trying on clothes and learn to dress and love the body you are in. There are no size or weight requirements here. I'm your host, Miss J. Join me, won't you? Hey, Glam Gal. Welcome back to the podcast. Remember when you were little and you were really excited to watch Sesame Street? And there was the Count and Cookie Monster and the whole gang was there. And you were really excited about the ability to count to 10. And eventually when you were able to count to 100, it was like you'd reach some new level of understanding. It was amazing. And when you were little, people would hand you things and tell you to count them. They'd be like, how many is this? How old are you? And it was like magic every time you held up your little hands to show someone your age. Proudly sported that you were this many. And you had no issues with saying you were this many and a half or a quarter. Because numbers had no emotional impact. It was just this exciting new thing that you learned. And if someone handed you 2 cookies and told you that they gave you 3, you would call some bullshit on that. You'd be like, no, excuse me, this is only 2 cookies. I can count 1, 2. And if someone told you, oh no, 2 actually means 4, sometimes 6, sometimes 8, you would call shenanigans. You'd be like, what? That doesn't make sense. I know my numbers. 1 + 2 = 3. Hello, have you not seen the count? What about my boy Cookie Monster? He knows how to count. You would have no issues with being completely outraged if someone tried to sell you a line about what numbers actually meant and that a 2 was a 4, also sometimes a 6, sometimes a 10. You'd be like, what? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know my numbers. You could not sell a little kid on this BS. In fact, I know certain little kids, and I actually love little kids like this because I was one of them, who have no problem calling adults on their shenanigans. No, that's not how it went. That's not what you said. That's not what you did. Has your kid ever called you and put you on blast, like in front of other human adults? Because little kids have no emotional attachment to any set of numbers. They're pretty committed to the truth. It's pretty amazing. And they'll call shenanigans on any adult who tries to convince them that the 2 cookies they handed them were actually 3 or 4, sometimes 6. So why am I telling you all of this? Because you know I always have a point to these weird stories. I know that a lot of you glam gals have some drama around the dressing room. Now we've talked about janky dressing rooms, specifically in episode 1 when I got a red dress stuck on my head. But I'm not talking just about the general janky ambience of most dressing rooms with the dim yellow lighting, the grody carpet, the weird scratched graffiti into the mirrors. I'm talking about your brain having some crazy ass drama over the tag size on the clothing that you bring into the dressing room. And if you were a little kid and someone told you that a 4 is actually a 2 and sometimes a 6, you would call shenanigans. You would be outraged. You would have no emotional attachment to that. You would just call straight up BS on that madness. But as adults, somehow we assign emotional attachment to a certain number. And we make it mean something about ourselves. Have you ever tried on a certain size, swearing that you were definitely that size, but just so happens in this particular store, you're a larger size? And sometimes it works in your favor. Sometimes you go into a store committed to some number in your head that you are definitely this size, only to be pleasantly surprised that in this particular store you happen to be a smaller size. We attach so much import to this number that's completely arbitrary. Let me give you some brief history on retail sizing so that you too can start to call shenanigans. Standardized sizing in the United States actually started with military uniforms, and it was based upon the circumference of a man's chest. Well, that works for men, but not so well for women whose chest sizes vary from gal to gal. Then they tried to standardize sizing in the 1940s, again, based on busts. And when they invited a bunch of women to come get measured for standardized sizing in about 1938, it excluded all women of color. It also only included potentially poor working class women who were given a fee for being measured. So this was a tiny demographic of the overall population. Then they really tried to standardize measurements in 1958. But again, this became a problem because it was through the enlisted help of the catalogs who had a vested interest in standardized sizing. There did become a national standard, but that was done away with in 1983. And retail stores were left to their own devices, which is why sometimes you're a 2, also a 4, sometimes a 6, maybe a 10. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. A size 16 model in the 1940s was a size 12 in the 1960s, and by today's standards would be a size 6. Now that's not to depress you or bum you out. I want to offer you this. The number doesn't mean anything. It's actually completely neutral and totally made up by retail companies. If we assign meaning to the number, we're essentially giving away our power and how we're going to think and feel about ourselves to some giant corporation who literally picked a number out of the air. Now, if you've ever sewn anything or been in a sewing studio and you looked at mannequins from the 1960s onward, you could see that women's shapes, at least what's considered the ideal shape for any given century or era or decade, varies greatly. Now, if you look at the ladies from the 50s, they are very hourglass silhouette, and they're a little more on the curvy side. Their breasts sit up higher on their chests. If you look at the mannequins from the 70s, there's definitely a flatness that was acquired somewhere, and the roundness to the lower belly disappeared completely, and the breasts sit a little bit lower on the body. And same is true for the 90s. If you looked at 90s mannequins, even the quote-unquote plus-size mannequins are a little on the flatter side, and their curves have been smoothed out, and their breasts sit somewhere differently on the chest. So, Glam Gal, your mindset homework is to really wrap your brain around calling shenanigans on retail sizing. Remember that defiant little kid that you used to be, the one who used to put adults on blast, the one who would never accept 2 cookies and being told that they were 3. The little kid who knew how to count from 1 to 10, but assigned no meaning other than the fact that she could count. Remember that little girl. Because I want you to have that same level of defiance, that same level of assuredness when you walk into that dressing room. I want you to start calling shenanigans on the retail sizing. And I want you to stop assigning it meaning. It doesn't mean that you're fat. It doesn't mean that you're disgusting. It doesn't mean that you've gained weight or that there's something irreparably wrong with you. It's just a number on a tag. And it's kind of a made-up one at that. Now, from a practical standpoint, next time you're in the dressing room and you're really trying to work on this, I want you to bring 3 sizes in with you. I find sometimes that my clients are so committed to the number they have in their head, oftentimes because they've lost weight and they're really, really worked hard to get to this number. They've assigned so much power and meaning to this number. This number means they have officially arrived. Sometimes they find when I ask them to try on 3 different sizes in the same garment, going up or down can make all the difference in fitting. And when you stop committing to an arbitrary number, you can actually find garments that fit you and that serve you, that allow you to be bolstered up, even just for a moment, so that you can get to that next confident thought. Now, again, it's not the clothing size itself. The goal when you put on clothing is to have the clothing serve you. It's just a dead object until you put it on. It's just a pile of fabric until you assign it meaning. It's just a number on a tag until you assign it meaning. And if you're willing to get curious and try on 3 different sizes in the same garment, you may find that one of the sizes, the one which you didn't initially go for, actually fits you better. And this little gift that you give yourself, where you say, I call shenanigans on the tag size. I'm going for fit, not a fake number. And you really, really get curious about what fits you, not the number on the tag. You're just one step closer to being that stylish woman, that confident woman that you so desire to be. Confidence is a muscle that you exercise. It's the accumulation of little thoughts that you think about yourself, the feelings that you assign to those thoughts, and the little actions that you take on your own behalf. Confidence is something that no one can take away from you, not even an arbitrary tag size. To develop confidence over time requires you to get a little uncomfortable sometimes. Truly confident women aren't always seeking safety. They're not stuck in ruts. They're not committed to a tag size number. They're willing to be open, curious. And I invite you to do the same. Open yourself up to the idea that tag size is BS. You call shenanigans, and you're going to walk into any dressing room and own it like a straight up boss. Because you're there just to try on clothes. And you're not assigning it any deeper meaning about who you are as a woman or who you could be. So your mission, Glam Gal, should you choose to accept it, is to tell all the other Glam Gals shenanigans and BS on the tag sizes. Recall that little girl who defiantly said, 2 means 2, 6 means 6. Quit trying to mess around with numbers. And last, step into any dressing room with curiosity. Embrace that you're going to be a little uncomfortable. Try on 3 different sizes in the same garment. Yeah, your brain might throw up some shade and some drama, but just remember, Miss J and all the other Glam Gals are supporting you on your journey. We're cheering you on through the interwebs. If you need to, take this podcast into the dressing room with you. Just play it on low in the background. I got you, girl. And boo-boo, you look fly. I would love to see what you're all up to this week. If you take on this mission and you go into a dressing room, feel free to use the hashtag #NewGlamGal so I can cheer you on. All right, let's get it. Miss J out.